D-Day was June the 6th, and the American ground forces went into France. And they were not quite pinned down, but they were not advancing very much. They were building up their supplies and building up their manpower. And they didn't advance very far into France. And during that time, we were flying tactical missions, meaning that we were flying supporting the ground troops. We were bombing bridges and highway bridges and railway bridges and embankments, viaducts, anything to keep them from supplying their troops. And during that time, the French underground was very active, and they were sending back reports by radio to the American headquarters, and we would know where the flak guns were. And on the briefing map, there'd be a red circle around where a flak gun was, and our navigators would plot our course to weave, zigzag, just outside that red circle. And we got kind of used to flying along with no flak, no opposition, except until we got to the target. There's always flak over the target. Well, in late July, they broke out of the Americans were advancing fast. General Patton was just running wild, really. And the French could not get the information back about the Germans were retreating so fast they couldn't keep up with where the flak guns were. So we began to experience unexpected flak. We had no intelligence. So we'd just be flying along straight and level in formation, and suddenly they'd open up on us. Well, the Germans had radar attached to their flak guns. It's kind of primitive, but it worked pretty good. And if they had plenty of time to zero in on us, well, their first shot was effective. And on August the 7th, I was flying on the wing of a man named Major Clayton Lee. And we were flying along straight and level, not expecting flak. And suddenly, his cockpit was just a solid ball of fire. And we had an escape hatch above us, and I saw him and the co-pilot raise up in their seats trying to get out, and then they just slumped back, and their airplane fell off into a turning dive. That was so hard. I was so horrified and scared and traumatized and everything else that when he started down, I just kept flying formation on his wing until suddenly I realized what I was doing and kind of come out of my trance and pulled back up and rejoined the formation. At the debriefing after that mission was over, the flight surgeon told me that they had probably inhaled those flames, which seared their windpipe, and that's why they slumped back. Of course, they all perished. That was on August the 7th. On August the 9th, the exact same thing happened to me, except the fire was back into Bombay. Once again, we was flying along in good formation. We were not taking evasive action or anything. And the very first shot set me on fire. So I gave the bailout signal. and bailed out. And that's how I was shot down. Now, as I was floating down in the parachute, I was aware that I was being shot at. I could hear it. And of course I was pretty scared. But when I hit the ground, these Germans come rushing up to me, and they were pretty nice. I mean, they were not just awful. So I thought, well, they were just shooting at me just to see if they could hit me, kind of shooting for sport.
Do you know exactly where that was that you came down in?
Where I came down?
Yeah.
It was at Alencon, which is a town a little bit inland from the base of the Cherbourg Peninsula. Well, they took me, and first American I met was an artillery guy, and we spent a day or two together, and then we got to a collection point, and then we were put on open trucks and hauled back. We went right through Paris, and we got to a place called Chalon-sur-Mer, east of Paris, and there they separated the airmen from the ground troops. And that's where I met some old boys that I spent the next 9 months with. They were Air Force officers.
Did they interrogate you?
Oh, we had lots of interrogation. When I first was captured, and then again a day or two later, and again a day or two later, and then the formal interrogation was at Chalon-sur-Mer. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. And that's where the real interrogation took place. And it was when I was in Northern Ireland taking orientation for combat, they told us exactly what would happen if we were shot down and captured. He says, whatever your rank may be, the guy that interrogates you will outrank you. They'll put on a insignia to show that they outrank you. And the first thing they'll do is bring out a form about 8.5 by 13 with a big red cross at the top. And they'll say, now, in order that we can notify your next of kin through the Red Cross, just fill out this form. And that form asks every question in the world. Where you was born, and what your religion was, where your home was, when you went in the Air Force, what your group number was, what your squadron number was, what your commanding officer was. Just of course, all under the Geneva Conference, all we had to furnish was our name, rank, and serial number. And this guy, it was a British guy in Northern Ireland telling us about it. He said, go ahead and put in your name, rank, and serial number, and then in every other blank, draw a heavy line where they cannot fill anything in, and hand it back to him. And he said, if you'll do that, well, your interrogation will be much shorter. And when it's over, they will write on it, a gut Soldat, or a good soldier. And but he said, if you give them one little bit of information, then they'll say, oh, we can get some stuff out of him, and they'll keep you for days and days and days. Well, I did just what the Brett told me to do. I drew a heavy line through that. He said, oh, we can't notify your next of kin. I said, well, that's all right. And So my interrogation was pretty brief, because I followed the recommended procedure. Some of the guys stayed in there a long time. I've read about them. Well, I've heard about them too. Talked to them, for that matter. Some of the guys in the POW camp.
What were your impressions of the camp when you got to it?
That camp was divided into compounds. It about 1,500 men to each compound. And when I got there, they were opening a brand new compound. I believe it's called North 2. And it was brand new. So it was nice. I mean, it was nicer than the old ones. And of course, like I say, the first thing we got was a shower. We got processed. They made a mug shot of us. And then they gave us a Red Cross parcel, a whole, and we had a little bit of Red Cross food on the way in, but not much. And we thought it was pretty rich. And if you've been studying the war, we got there in September. And during the month of August, the American and British armies had just raced through France. And we really thought that they'd just keep coming through Germany too, and the war would be over in a matter of a month or two. So our morale was pretty good. And it turned out they had to stop and resupply. They advanced faster than their supply line did. I'm talking about the ground troops now. So the war wasn't over in a month, obviously. But it felt good to get back there and get a bath and get some real food. And it was not too bad then. That was the first week in September, I think. And our situation was not too bad during September, October, November, and even December. But by January, the armies were into Germany, and they were bombing the German railroad system. It was paralyzed, and they couldn't get the Red Cross. Their communications were shot. They couldn't get the Red Cross parcels to us. And we got in January, in February and March and April, we got pretty hungry. In January and February, it was cold and hungry. And the Germans gave us cabbage, potatoes, and black bread, which was kind of like pumpernickel, only more so. It was actually bitter. In fact, it was 30% sawdust. I think 30%. They put sawdust in there for roughage, as I understand it. But it was made out of barley, wheat, and potato flour. I never heard of potato flour and still don't know what it is. But some book I have gives the recipe for it. But it was kind of strong food. If you had enough of it, you could exist on it. But without those Red Cross parcels, we really got kind of hungry now. We didn't get down to, well, I tell you what, when I went down, I weighed 160 pounds. And when I was back in Allied control, I weighed about 125. I'd lost about 35 pounds. And the funny thing is, I never gained all of that back. I've never weighed over 150 since. I was in real good shape when I went down.